Hey everybody, this is a quick, hopefully quick, little lecture about how we read research about social problems, which is something that's important to know in the field. It will relate to the next assignment that you're going to get in your larger assignment. But we want to kind of know what data and research look like when we're building towards policy. So just, a flashback, science is built on the principles of the Enlightenment, that we want rational thought and empirical evidence to guide us. And so that guides the social science research endeavor. And we're talking about social problems. We are really going back to this basic model of the theory that you've seen a million times. Here it is, drawn on my little chalkboard. That here B is our social problem, whatever our social problem is: drug addiction, bias in policing, homelessness, whatever our problem is, and we're interested in what the cause is, right? And so we have a theory that the cause of homelessness, in this case A, is something, right? Drug addiction, lack of affordable housing, people not making enough money to be able to stay in their apartments. There are all kinds of issues, health problems. I mean, a lot of people get sick and all of a sudden they can't afford the bills and they're homeless. So we have a notion that there's a cause that impacts the problem. It might not be the only cause, but we're investigating it as a cause. So that's our theory, right? Part one is the theory. Then part two is we do some research. Let's go out into the field and find out if there's some evidence. Remember, we're never proving a theory. You never prove a theory in science. You only find evidence to support it. Gravity is not proven. The theory of gravity is not proven, but there's plenty of evidence to support it. Every time you fall down, that's some more evidence to support the theory of gravity. So if we've got some evidence, if we find some support that A is impacting B from our research, then we can start policy, right? Then we can start changing. If we want to change B, change A. So for example, if I find out that the lack of affordable housing is the main contributor to homelessness, that affordable housing is the A, and I want to reduce homelessness, I increase the amount of affordable housing. That's my policy, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do in Portland is build more low cost housing, low income housing. And so you change this, and you magically change this. Ooh, see how that works. All right, so that's the basic theoretical principle we're working on. Thank you, Gravity. And so what I wanted to do is kind of talk about what you will see when you look at research on social problems. What are the elements when you're reading social research? And so the main place that we look for social research, I'm looking for it, it's all downstairs, is in academic journals. Hold on a second, I'm going to go find it, an academic journal. Okay, academic journals. So this is an example of an academic journal. This is the American Behavioral Scientist. This is an issue devoted to terrorism in the 21st century, and the reason that I have it is, I don't know if you can see this. There's me right there. Wait. I have an article on this one entitled White Boys to Terrorist Men, Target Recruitment of Nazi Skinheads, Randy Blazak. So the value of academic journals, whether it's social sciences or in the medical field, is they're peer reviewed, which means other peers, other scientists read the research that's been submitted, and if they think it's good, it gets published. So you don't get crap, you get good stuff in journals. Nowadays, because these journals are mostly kept in libraries, a lot of journals are available online, and I'll be giving you some good resources to find good academic research online. But this is sort of the gold standard for social research. And then once it appears in the journal, then it ends up in a textbook or ends up in a mainstream book. But this is sort of the starting place for academic research on social problems, but also coronavirus, right? I mean, anytime medical research is happening, it pops up in the medical journals before it ends up in your episode of Good Morning America. So I wanted to give you kind of what you will be looking for when you read research about social problems, whatever social problem you're interested in. So here are the elements of a good research article. All right, again, this is all going to work towards your assignments. The first thing is every piece of research has a research question. And that research question is usually guided by a theory. What is we want to know if this variable is connected to this variable. We want to be interested in, here's a good question I would like to ask. When our leaders wear masks in public, does that increase the number of people who wear masks? So like, this is a really good question. I'd love to do some Insta research on. If Donald Trump were to do a PSA where he says wear a mask, would there be an increase in the number of people who wear masks and therefore a drop in the amount of coronavirus cases? I think it's a legitimate question. So we always start with our research question. My initial research question was, why were people joining the racist skinhead groups? Why was that happening? Sometimes it's just a very general why. So we want to start with, what is the question that they want to answer? Every piece of research starts with a question. Why is this happening? Or how is this variable connected to this variable? Is there a causal relationship? So we will always want to be able to identify what is the research question. That's number one. Number two is, it's great to have a question and to have, a theory that it comes from, but you need a scientific method. You need some type of methodology by which you want to investigate that question, not just sitting back and coming up with an answer. And there are articles in journals that are that. I've certainly had policy pieces that are like, here's what I think is important. This piece in here was based on a lot of interviews and observational research of skinheads in the Portland metro area. Wonder why that would be. It's because where I live. So we need a methodology. That methodology could be something like surveys. That could be observational research, the kind of research that I do, including interviews. That research could be experimental settings. That research could be looking at what we call existing data sources that are looking at sort of population data, the census data, and crime data. That could be what we call content analysis, analyzing things like TV shows and newspapers. I mean, there's a whole host of methodologies. And the nice thing about journal articles is they always have lots of subtitles. And there usually is a subtitle that will say methodology. So, for example, this article on the future of terrorism has a section, methods and definitions. Like, there's usually a section that tells you this is the methodology of this research. In fact, it's not research unless there is a methodology section. And this is a really important thing, because you'll find things in journals that aren't actual research. They're just sort of thought pieces or policy pieces. There needs to be a section saying this is what the methods of this research are. Really important. It's really important for assignment number 2 that there's a section saying this is how we're doing the research. This is the scientific method that we're using. Also, the idea of the Enlightenment is that past knowledge is useful for future knowledge. So one of the great things that came out of the Enlightenment was the idea of the encyclopedia, that we take the things that we've learned and we put them in books, and then we learn new things, and then we update those books. So we're sort of building our knowledge on the backs of the past knowledge. It's sort of a cumulative process. So something that research journals will have is what we call a literature review. And a literature review is just a review of the relevant literature in the area. And it's very handy for me. So, for example, if there's a new piece that comes out about hate crimes, I'm interested in what's new about it, but I'm also interested in what literature that they reviewed before they read that piece, for 2 reasons. One, you want to know kind of what the relevant research is out there, and the other reason is I want to see if they mention me. And sometimes they do, and it's like, ooh, according to Blazak's study. So besides the narcissistic element, you're going to be looking for research that's building on other research. So literature review is always an important part, and there's usually a little subheading that says literature review or previous research. Then there is the actual process of collecting the data, which we will call the findings. What did they find once they implemented? So they've got their theory, they've got their research question, they've talked about their method, they've talked about what other people have done. Now, once they do their method, what do they find? What are their findings? What is what we would call the data? And data can be numbers, data can be observations. In my research, there's all kinds of data, including the type of beer that skinheads were drinking was data. Foster's. It's the skinhead beer of choice if you're a racist neo-Nazi skinhead for some reason. And then there's the analysis. What does that mean? How does that relate to our theory? Does this uphold the theory? Does this show that we were wrong about the theory? Does this suggest another theory? What does it all mean? What does it mean, Alfie? The next section, which is very relevant for us in social problems, is what do you do with it? What we call our policy suggestions. How do we take this research? We find some evidence that A is having impact on B, and we want to change B. What would be a good way to turn this into policy? So not always, but quite often there are policy suggestions. What we found based on this research on causes of homelessness is that we need more low-income housing to reduce the homeless population, since that's the number one thing that drives people into living under bridges. So there will be policy suggestions. And then usually, sometimes at the end, there's a little future research. Like, if I had more money or more time or other researchers who want to take this on, here's something they should look at. For example, we didn't look at gender, or we didn't look at race, or we did this study in Portland. It might be better to do this study, back east where the population demographics are a little bit different. Or hey, how about in future research, they spend more time or get a better sample or something like that. Usually there's a little bit of like, if I could, here's what I would do for the next step of this research. So what you're going to be doing is evaluating research, because there's good research and bad research. There's good methods and bad methods. There's good sampling techniques and bad sampling techniques. What you're going to be doing is as having an opportunity to look at research about social problems and then figuring out how that research helps inform policy. What do you do? So what? People did all this research. They've got tons of journals. I mean, the library at PCC is full of really cool academic journals. The internet has lots of access to these. So what? Well, we want to take this research and we want to use it to address the problems and make the world a better place. And so this is what we call research-informed or best practices or evidence-based research. And it's kind of the buzzword now when you're developing policies, that you want to have some research to back it up. You don't want to say, what you need to do is just lock everybody up. Yeah, well, the research doesn't say that helps anything. In fact, the research says that locking everybody up just makes things worse. So we want to have evidence-based, research-based policy that is rooted in something that actually makes sense. That's the Enlightenment. We're here to carry on the Enlightenment. All right, that's all I wanted to share with you in this quick little bit. We've got a little question at the end of this, and there you go. Oh, short and sweet. I like it. All right.